Yes, I'm Norma Levy, New Plaza's president, and we are a nonprofit devoted to you film lovers. Thank you for being with us today. Gary Palmucci, our curator, has chosen for today's talk Bernardo Bertolucci's stunning and controversial 1971 Italian masterpiece, The Conformist. Gary will be joined in this discussion by our wonderful film historian, Max Alvarez, and they in turn will be joined by Dan Cahill, a special guest host for us, and by a wonderful guest direct from Italy who has worked on the film that we'll be discussing today. I thank you for coming, and Gary, please begin.
Well, thank you, Norma. In every young moviegoer's life, there's certain films that shape your view of the cinematic art, for that matter, the world, and really stay with you over the decades. For me, one of these was Bernardo Bertolucci's The Conformist, which I saw now nearly half a century ago. The incandescent performances of Jean-Louis Trintignant, Dominique Sanda, who was only 18 when she made the film, and Stefania Sandrelli, and boldly brilliant uses of color, light, shadow, camera movement, orchestrated by Bertolucci and his now legendary cinematographer, Vittorio Storaro, who's going to join us in person here shortly, have always stayed with me. And I know they've influenced legions of filmmakers and movie lovers from around the world. Many New Plaza members may remember our special screening at the NYIT Cinema of The Conformist back in January 2019, where we had a great Q&A afterwards with Molly Haskell and Philip Lopate. And several weeks ago, when Dan Cahill approached us with the idea of actually interviewing Vittorio Storaro from his beautiful home in Rome, which you're going to see shortly, via the efforts of a cinematographer friend of his, well, of course, we couldn't resist. Now, Max, was your first viewing of The Conformist, is it as luminous a memory as, say, The 400 Blows?
Well, yes and no. I was very affected by it when I saw it as a teenager, but I saw this awful 16 millimeter scratchy print at a theater in Milwaukee. Then I saw a somewhat better 35. Then I saw a stunning restoration in the 80s. Then I saw some subsequent reissues that looked awful. And you, Gary, in New Plaza Cinema got me to fall in love with this film again at that screening. I don't know where you found the digital cinema copy restoration of it, but it looked—
That was a point at which Paramount Pictures originally released the film in the early 70s, and that was not unusual in the 70s for major studios to release grade A foreign films. But what they did with them in some cases was, unimaginable today. There were English dub versions common at that time, and there was one of The Conformists that kept popping up in revival theaters, like a Jack in the Box. It was always playing on a double feature with another Paramount picture, and in some cases, some very odd choices like Peter Bogdanovich's Targets and Lindsay Anderson's If. But I think what we saw in 2014 was the point at which Paramount's rights had expired and the rights went via an Italian sales agent to the distributor Kino Lorber. And they've done a pretty good job, I think, with the digital copies that have been circulating since then. But we're going to get a lot more insight into the making of the film here very soon from its peerless cameraman.
And we're going to start with the original 1970 Paramount trailer. Now, there are a lot of things wrong here in the sense that they're giving away way too much. They're obviously focusing on all the sensational aspects of The Conformist. But I have to say, I like the narration. I think it kind of gets to the intellectual gist of this powerful film that Bertolucci based on the Moravia novel. The print is faded, so it does not do justice to Vittorio Storaro's camera work, but we're going to see better copies of that coming up. Here's the original trailer.
Observe this man closely. His eyes have seen violence. His nose has breathed corruption. His mouth has whispered both love and betrayal. Paramount Pictures presents The Conformist. a film directed by Bernardo Bertolucci, a study in the seduction of the soul. The rape of the mind. The art of political assassination. The Conformist, acclaimed at the Berlin Film Festival. The Conformist, filmed in the palaces of power, in the streets and secret cells of revolution. The Conformist, hailed at the New York Film Festival. Starring Jean-Louis Trintignant, surpassing even his roles in Z, and A Man and a Woman. The Conformist, a film that lashes out at a world gone mad. And all at once, the camera becomes an instrument of passion. A weapon of destruction. A time bomb of truth for this day and age. The Conformist. You dare not forget him.
Number of passengers set to
Well,
1.
I do like that tagline, "You dare not forget him."
Yeah, those guys knew how to cut a trailer in the Paramount. They may have had no clue what the film was about. And it sort of reminds me a little bit of their trailer for Once Upon a Time in the West, another Paramount film co-written by Bernardo Bertolucci, which showed every gun battle and every, critical dramatic point in the film and gave stuff away. But I wish we had seen Dominique Sandra's entrance in the film, which I think is one of the most sensual things. It certainly stayed with a 17-year-old viewer and has stayed with him over the decades. When we see her at the door of the professor's apartment, there's that kind of swinging door and the very aggressive dog. Then, of course, later on, I realized he was kind of doing a Joseph von Sternberg, Marlene Dietrich thing here when he introduced La Dominique.
She's wearing trousers and she has a dangling cigarette. And Stefano Sandrelli's entrance is also memorable in that beautiful striped dress that she's wearing. We're going to take a look at so many of the memorable visual set pieces of this film. And one way we were able to learn more about that was by this magical experience a few days ago of interviewing Vittorio Storaro, the cinematographer, live from Rome. We have our dear comrade in arms, Dan Cahill, to thank for arranging that. Dan, welcome back to New Plaza Cinema Online Talkback. Tell us first of all about Vittorio Storaro before we hear from him directly.
Of course. I'm going to take less than a minute, however, to quote this guy, the director of the film, describing the film before its release. He was being interviewed regarding the Spider Stratagem, and he was trying to interest the interviewer in the upcoming film. He described it as a film entirely without joy, a terrible, even a ferocious film. Just thought I would lay that out there for you. That's coming from the auteur of the film. His director of photography, Vittorio Storaro, collaborated with him on 6 feature films and about approximately 70 other feature film and TV credits. He was born in Rome. His father was a projectionist at Lux Film, which I believe was a production company. And he encouraged Vittorio to study photography at a very early age, which turned out to be age 11. he started getting schooling in photography, I'm assuming in addition to his regular studies. And he went to government film schools. Apparently there was more than one in Italy at the time. He got his first position as a camera operator at age 21 and his first actual cinematography credit as director of photography in 1969 when he would have been 29. Beyond his work with Bertolucci, he has made the following films with some guy named Francis Coppola. I don't know if you've heard of him or not. Apocalypse Now, One from the Heart, and Tucker, the Man and His Dream. He then worked with Warren Beatty on 3 features, Reds, Dick Tracy, which is a film worth looking at again, believe me, and Bulworth. And most recently, he has been in charge of the photography on 4 of the most recent Woody Allen films. It's worth noting that there are several gaps in Storaro's career when he decided to stop working and went back to study more. And I'm presuming, since he told us in his interview that in film schools on cinematography, all they teach is the technical stuff. They don't teach art. And he loves to make references to great painters, etc. So we may be dealing with some of that in this program today. Over to you guys.
Well, that's great, Dan. But before we get to Mr. Storaro himself, Dan, you originally had you were curious about the different looks in the Conformist. The Rome looks one way, Paris looks another way, and particularly the Paris element is what we're going to focus on today.
Well, yes. If you've seen the film, which I sincerely hope everyone has, you know that Rome was under fascist rule and Paris was a free city. And they chose to depict the 2 cities, this tale of 2 cities, in very contrasting ways. And I believe all I did was lay that out in front of Vittorio and ask him to talk about his choices, in particular, the choice to use the color blue so frequently in Paris. It seems as if the ambient light 24/7 is blue. And if you've ever spent a winter at Paris, you kind of have that feeling. So shall we roll it?
Absolutely. I will now turn the proceedings over to Signore Storaro as he talks about determining the visual look, especially in the Paris sequences of the Conformists.
I was lucky that when we went in Paris was the beginning of December, more or less this time. Paris is in North Europe, and usually is winter, and is most of the time there is a very big cloud, or particularly darker. I remember the first scene that we did in Paris was the Dominique Sanda teaching dancing to the little children. We were into an interior of the dancing room, and using the artificial light in interior was showing the exterior completely blue. And I was shocked. For me, I was never taught in advance that idea. I saw those kind of images. I say, Bernardo, look how beautiful is this difference between the interior with the artificial light and the exterior with natural light. I love this look very much. And he said, Vittorio is great. And I said to him, Bernardo, but maybe we shouldn't use those kind of idea only for this sequence. Most of the time in many pictures, you can do one shot or one sequence at dusk time. Is a kind of magic hour, no? They give you the natural light at this kind of color. I said to him, honestly, I didn't know exactly the meaning of the color blue. I know the meaning of the color much later on, but I felt that it was right. And I said, let's do the entire sequence in exterior of Paris in this color. Bernardo said to me, Vittorio, I like, really, not don't like, I love the idea, but we have 2 weeks to film the sequence in Paris. In 2 weeks' time, we have a Christian time. We have to go back to Rome. Do whatever you can. with any filter, with any sound, but we have to shoot from 8 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the evening. And that was really a major chance for me to try to make it those kind of vision with the kind of simple element that we had at that time in the technology. But the idea, in my opinion, was the most important one.
Gary, we're of course we're fans of Venetian blind shots from film noir. You probably remember the unusual uses of Venetian blinds early on when Marcello sees Julia in her
There's
apartment.
more than one striking use of Venetian blinds in The Conformist, but this scene early in the picture is probably the most striking, and his explanation, as we will shortly see, is amazing, and it involves Stefania Sandrelli making kind of a sensual entrance, which is different from but rivaling Dominique Sanda's in its impact in the first 20 minutes or so of the film.
Now it's a little technical, but even those of you without cinematography degrees, you'll get a sense of what he's talking about, and I know you'll find his explanation very refreshing and entertaining. So here's a look at the Venetian blinds sequence from The Conformist, or the first key one.
Nando said to me, Vittorio, speaking with Fernando Scarfiotti, we had the idea to film inside real location, to feel the reality of the living of the time, but outside any window. We don't want to see anything reality. With Nando, we think that we can put some kind of photograph, painting, any kind of images that telling us the outside, which means fascism, the period of the fascist time is outside. They will look, there's not real. They look like there is something funny. There is something not for real. But here we have a problem, because the sidewalk is not too wide in order that we can put like a structure, a billboard or something outside every window. So they said to us that we can have maximum couple of meters for us, no more than that. So we don't have the chance to do it. What do you think? What we can do? Actually, at that time I saw the kind of Venetian blind, they were in wood. And that was quite normal in the house that was made in 1930, 1940, those kind of time. They were way up. And I say, well, Bernardo, look at this kind of thing. I went over there. I pulled down the Venetian blind. When they come down, they open a little bit. Until they, if you want, you can close. I kept them open. And I told him, look over here. There is only the little strip of light, practically we can see. We don't really see outside. But I can have a very strong arc light making strip of light coming through into this kind of penumbra. I don't know how came this idea. I knew the painting of Caravaggio, honestly, I told you 1 year before, 1 or 2 years before, but I don't have any memory of those kind of example to think in a Caravaggio, no. I only went for that kind of idea to keep the concept that reality, true, was told by light. And now in this moment, the light was really very thin everywhere, but the unconscious is practically all over in a kind of this. So that was a kind of separation that was giving me the feeling of Marcello Clerici. And Bernardo said, fantastic, Vittorio, I love very much. But this is what was, you know, Bernardo was 28, I was 29 at the time when we started the Conformist. We were pretty young. The day while we start shooting, and once in a while, the electrical person outside was advised the gaffer that was inside the set that they have to change the carbon. You know, the strip light was possible because arc light, I usually have two negative and positive very close. They touch, they make a little flame between these two carbon sides, one positive, and they make a very strong or very thin light. Those thin light goes really straight, doesn't have any chance to go around to any element in front of it and make those strip light very strong, very neat. And once in a while they have to, because the carbon getting consumed practically, at one point they have to change the carbon. And they call me and I can say, wait a minute, we have another 30 seconds to finish the sequence, so maybe, okay, change the carbon. When they have to change the carbon, the light was up to the stand. They have to, with the wheel, they have to go down with the arc light. And at one point we see the light flowing up. Leonardo watched and say, Vittorio, look how beautiful it is. why we don't use it? And I say, Bernardo, it's doesn't have any logic. No, let's do it emotionally. Anytime the young lady go physically in front of him and try to kiss him, and try to make love with him. So anytime they go with an emotion, the light move. That's why I said, fantastic. Okay, so we invent a kind of switch with one little light outside. So when Stefania Sandrelli stand and go on top of him, I was making a cue outside, and the electrician started to go down with the phone. It was totally fantastic, totally emotional. There is no any justification. That's what we were. I mean, Conformist was a movie that was made with, probably because we were pretty young and we love cinema, but we invented anything that can have not necessarily a logic. What is important was the emotion. What is important was the fact that between reality and unreal, conscious and unconscious. That was the two main key all the time.
That was my laughter you heard in the background. You're such a wonderful storyteller. There are deliberate changes in filmmaking style in The Conformist. And Gary, what stood out for you was some of those tilted angles that suddenly appear out of nowhere.
That's right. And we asked Vittorio about this, and he made a point very emphatically, which perhaps we weren't as aware of. And by the way, we have to thank Laurie Turchin for supplying that beautiful photo from an old issue of American Cinematographer of the two of them behind the camera and Vittorio wearing a tie on the set, which would seem inconceivable to me that you'd need to do that. But he was saying that there's a real division, artistic division, or there certainly was in Italian films of that period, where camera movement was considered solely the province of the director, and the lighting was considered more or less solely the province of the cinematographer, with, I'm sure, some input from the director. Vittorio said he found out later in American films, depending on who you were working with, it was often a very different situation. I recall a remark Warren Beatty made on the set of Reds, which Vittorio shot and won the Oscar for, where he at one point suddenly said to the assembled cast and crew, well, on this movie, Pino Storaro is the director of how this picture is lit, Dick Silbert is the director of the sets and the production design, and I'm the director of the emotions. But in this case, Vittorio said the camera moves were very much Bernardo's conception and request, and what a phrase I hadn't heard in a long time, Dutch angles, which we're going to see, which gives some eccentric anticipation to the scene of Trentino going to visit his ailing mother.
And now let's hear what Signore Storaro has to say about these Dutch camera angles.
Let me clear once again, particularly in Bertolucci films, don't try to understand the logic. Don't try to understand the practical, normal, let's say, answer. Most of the time can be an idea that doesn't have any answer. Most of the time is a suggestion. Most of the time is a kind of, that you feel to do something different, what is normal. Play, you know, at the beginning, Bernardo told me, when you called me for The Conformist, we did already Spider Stratagem before. He said, Vittorio, at one moment I was thinking that doing The Conformist was better call an ancient cinematographer. There was play cinematography more or less in around 1940. But later I understood that also the director supposed to be at that age in case we want to do the replica in the way they was filming at that time. So that's why I like we do together again, because we have the same age. Bernardo is 1 year younger. So don't take that you have to give an answer to anything. Practically, Bernardo, I mention again, the decision of the shot is about Bernardo. And when you have 2 minutes more, I can tell you why it was in this way. But at this moment, Bernardo, this moment, he says, Vittorio, I would like to give something uneasy, something not normal in this little sequence, just to go to the mother house. The relationship between the son and the mother, the son and the father, is very important for Bernardo. And always he's tried to go into a particular look, let's say. And so we started with we call Dutch angle. I don't know why it's called Dutch angle, but it was giving the feeling of an uneasy way of feeling. But at the moment that we arrived, we didn't know that Manganiello was following him as well.
Right.
So there is two kind of different things, those two elements. But as soon as we arrived inside the gate, and we have Marcello arriving and Manganiello following, I said to Bernardo, in order maybe to make specific that kind of look that we had till now, would be nice that now he feel going into his own house practically, where he was living with his mother. So maybe we should go more changing the shot into the shot and going normal. That's why it was the kind of tilt.
The dog you hear in the background is Vittorio Storaro's dog, and I think it's completely appropriate given the role the dog plays in The Conformist towards the end. So I wanted to point that out. Dan, you were transfixed by the use of autumn leaves in one sequence of The Conformist early on in the film.
Indeed, but before that, I want to tell you both that I did a little research, courtesy of my partner Janet, and I know where the word Dutch comes from in Dutch angles. It has nothing to do with the Netherlands, but it is a corruption of the word Deutsch, which means German. And these very tilted angles appeared in the German expressionist film.
Of course.
Yes, it makes perfect sense when you realize that in Hollywood, they thought Dutch and Deutsch were the same thing. Okay.
That's great.
Yes, my favorite shot in the film is the one of the blowing leaves across the courtyard in his mother's home. And strangely enough, I find it very evocative. I can't tell you what it evokes, but I get this surge of emotion when I look at it. And so I therefore had to pose the question to Vittorio about what was this all about and what inspired it. So let's hear his response.
Take it away, Vittorio.
Once again, the answer is only the unknown, the mystery, because we were in a nice little house in 1920. Was not the real house, of course. It's some little villa near Villa Borghese that was empty, so the production could rent. And we were shooting the interior and also the exterior of the garden. And the moment. There are two moments. One was the chance to go inside the villa with the change of the shot. Going out, while we were preparing to go into the car, and the car leaving to go to the hospital where his father was, Bernardo asked to the special effect that was on the set all the time, in case we need the smoke, we need wind, and so on. Can you blow me all those beautiful leaves on the floor? And usually, every time that we use wind, they use from in front of the camera, so they're coming towards. No, he wants to do exactly the opposite, like the camera is pushing on the leaves. It's something that happened to his mind, and we did it, and it was beautiful, and we did it. That's all.
Gary, in the trailer for The Conformist, you may notice they had a few frames from the scene that was cut out of the US
I
version
did
in
notice that
1970.
today, yes.
The
Yeah,
Dance
yeah.
of the Blind. That's a scene that has fascinated you.
At about the 38-minute mark of the film, this 4 or 5 minute scene, Dance of the Blind, now appears in all versions of The Conformist that we see. However, as Vittorio told us, back at the 1970 New York Film Festival premiere of The Conformist, the film was very well received, but there was a sense that maybe the picture was a little overlong in some way or another. So Bertolucci, as he often did with his films, decided to take out that scene, and it remained out until 1994 when it was reinstated in the film. And I've always thought the transition between what was there before was a beautiful transition in its own right. And if anybody's really interested, we can maybe discuss it offline exactly what that was. But this scene is now back in there, and it has its own raison d'etre as well. And it's beautifully staged. There's kind of two different levels of action, which I think Vittorio went into detail about for us as well.
So he's going to talk about the lighting and also some of the architectural inspirations for this scene that was eventually restored to The Conformist. The
Out
Dance
for 25 years, now back in.
Exactly.
Every Sunday, we were doing with Nando Scarfiotti, Bernardo, and myself, looking into this area. There is an area in Rome called Eur, A-U-R, which was the area where they prepare the exhibition in 1940. That time, the architecture made between 1935 and 1940, that they built a lot of building in a very particular architectural style, which was perfect for the time, anyhow. So we were looking at a different set, let's say, till we arrived at that moment. I remember I don't know why Bernardo to go, myself and Nando Scarfiotti alone, looking at one under. There was in this building, there was also under the first level, but you can have little window on top that you can see the sidewalk where people was passing by up there. And Nando said, you know, the fact that we want to have a location there for blind people, they don't have too much money, they don't want to be exposed. So this can be interesting, the fact that they can under the first floor. Good. And Nando asked me, Vittorio, what do you think? Which kind of light you can like to have over here? And I said, well, feeling to have something that is not realistic, let's say. I don't like to have the light coming through those small window on top of the frame like a normal sequence. What kind of present blind people can do to somebody that has the view? And I said, in my opinion, they would love to give the best present that they can, because they cannot see colors. So why we don't have a Chinese bowl made by paper, you know, with different color. Mm-hmm. So practically we can have all the color that we want all around. We don't have to have a specific color, but colors everywhere. So any way they move, they change the color of the face and so on, which is the best present that they can give to somebody that can see if they cannot. That's how we did.
That's beautifully stated. An example of some of the shifting photographic styles in The Conformist is the train compartment scene between Marcello and his new bride or fiancée, Julia. It has a very old Hollywood look to it, where the train window appears to be showing a rear projected image of a movie of the passing countryside, which is what we would have seen in the 1930s or 40s. So it has a retro look. But as Storaro points out here, there is symbolism there as well. Let's hear him talk about the train compartment scene.
Non ti piaceva?
Ero passiva.
E poi?
His wife, they just married, and they do just honeymoon. And the wife tried to be honest with him and tried to tell him that she was is not illibate any longer, that she has in some physical affair with somebody else. And that was very strange, the connection between the two. Look like they is almost pleased about the fact that she is not illibated, that she is not really a young girl, that's all. But there was another idea into that. The chance to move from the vision of Rome to vision of Paris, we said, okay, I'm going to filming the real location that we go on between with the train moving. And I went with my little crew of the camera in one Sunday to do some shot just to view outside. But at the end, when we were into the carriage, I said, Bernardo, the idea I would like to show outside something that the traveling in train between Rome and Paris probably can be 6 hours, 10 hours. I don't remember what was exactly the time of the train at the time, but the sequence looked like only 5 minutes. And Bernardo had a wonderful idea. Said, Vittorio, okay, I love it if we can show the reality of that they are inside, but outside is a kind of fantasy time they go. So practically outside, we should go from morning to afternoon to sunset to evening. So the time that you spend real to arrive in Paris.
Dan, we've been talking about these abrupt shifts in filmmaking technique towards, well, not towards the end, but it's certainly the end of the major narrative. There is an abrupt shift to the handheld camera in a scene that remains very difficult to watch. It's so emotional. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, it's probably the emotional climax of the film, certainly one of the most stirring set pieces in it. And well, Vittorio will explain why in his answer, but there was a lot of pressure to finish that sequence and move on. The light is fading, and it's time to suspend the plan of cameras on dollies and tripods and go for the handheld. And it was quite a little adventure for him to do it. So let's hear him describe it. He does much better than I do.
And when we're talking handheld, we're literally talking about holding the camera in your hand.
Yeah.
So that's what we're referring to here. And it's what's considered a risk to suddenly shift to that form of photography after you've had these rather smoother movements. Here's Storaro discussing it.
Most of the time I was taking the camera myself. All the camera and that camera, also the shot following Dominique Chandal running in the forest was done by myself. Because it's impossible to explaining something very special that you have to do, maybe to tilt, to be closer, to be wider in some kind of dramatic point. At that time I was quite young, I was 30 years old. So I could do, and the idea to do just end camera once, but we did I think 3 times, 2 or 3 times, yes, was because we were in the North Italy, once again it was winter, and at one moment Bernardo realized that we practically have only one afternoon to finish the sequence of the killing of the father, and we don't have the chance to put the camera dolly, the crane, or whatever other tool they normally was using. And he says, he asking to me, Vittorio, what we can do? Because we have also a couple of hours, no more than that. So we have to do all the entire thing in one shot. And I say, Bernardo, let's do it in a kind of more dramatic way, probably. Let me try to follow her till the end. And so that's what we did. And the shot was quite complicated because at the beginning, I was pretty far away. I have to try to follow. After reaching the second assassin, they trade the gun and throw the gun to the man in front of him in order to pick up the other one. Sometimes I was almost stopping, was not able to look into the camera. I was putting the camera over here, practically with not seeing the camera because I was running so much. I was more or less trying to be in shot. And I was falling. Only when they stop, they throw the gun, I was able to go in the camera and try to understand the way I was. And afterwards continue. Till that I wrap it up to the end. And when the Dominique was completely shot and falling down, Bernardo was far away, of course. I took the decision to don't stay over there, because stop over there in the leading character dying seems to me there was no any emotion. So I tried to turn around to her, tried to almost turn around, and I did the first shot. When we finished, Bernardo asked me, Vittorio, what is going on? I said, Vittorio, he said, why are you there, Vittorio? I saw you that you were turning around her. But why do you don't turn completely in the way after you can see the assassin go away? They did their own work, let's say. So we finished with them in one single shot. If you notice in the sequence, once in a while, there is also one tele-lens, because for safety, Bernardo put anyhow a piece of dolly with a long lens with the other camera operator, just in case he need to have a little cut. But one or two little pieces, I think, in the sequence. And I did once again everything. I turned around, I went with the people, and I finished. I was like, because I mean, everything was uphill. And at the end, Bernardo says, Vittorio, practically we finished. We have another 15 minutes, no more. You think, are you sure? I said, Bernardo, believe me, I sure when I look into whether I have the camera over here, also the light doesn't go into the loop. I guess, but I'm not completely sure. I think it's fine. And I said, let's do another shot. Can you make another shot? Let's try. I did the third shot. And when I arrived, it was really fun. Bernardo said to me, Vittorio, how is it going? I said, Bernardo, the emotion is so strong that I don't care how it look. I can tell you there was an incredible emotion, the entire sequence. But I didn't know what I shot at.
Grazie, Signore Storaro. We are going to eventually be posting a longer version of this interview for fans who would like to access that. New Plaza Cinema will let everyone know when that version is prepared. Before we move on to questions and thoughts, Dan, you have read the Moravia novel. I read it too. What was your takeaway? Oh, you got the fancier version than I have.
I got the last copy available from Amazon, so it may be a while. I do recommend reading it, although I'm about to spoil something. I don't think you'll be missing much. First of all praise to Bertolucci for his adaptation of this novel. He did an admirable job, and it's very hard to find a situation where a movie improved on the book. But I'm sure you all remember the excruciating ending of the story in Rome, where he finds Lino the chauffeur and ends up accusing him of the murder he himself has just committed. Devastating story. Well, in the book, he does run into Lino, but there's no confrontation. He's just reassured that, oh, he didn't actually kill Lino, which he thought he had over the decades. And then he and Julia decide to leave Rome and go out to the country house where her mother is living. Well, here it comes, folks. As they're driving out there, an Allied bomber flies overhead, drops a bomb randomly on the road, and kills them in their car. Now, this is what is commonly referred to by the Latin phrase deus ex machina. And I want to quote, you may have heard of this guy, Robert McKee, who is widely considered to be the guru of storytelling. And he has a comment about deus ex machina in his book. He says, deus ex machina, which by the way, literally means the gods from the machine. This was in ancient Roman and Greek plays. They would literally lower people playing the gods from up above to figure out all the problems and put everything to rest, rather than the playwright himself having to come up with a good ending. Deus ex machina not only erases all meaning and emotion, it's an insult to the audience. Now, this is what he wrote in his book. In his lecture, he got somewhat more blunt. He said, audiences hate that shit. So that's how Moravia ended the book. And thank God Bertolucci knew that audiences would hate it that way. So he came up with a brilliant ending.
Marcello's not going to get off with it that easily. He's going to have to live with what he's done. This was the picture's only Oscar nomination for screenplay, which of course today seems absurd that it wasn't nominated for cinematography and numerous other things, but it's still appreciated as much as ever.
And just thank you, Dan and Gary, but thank you, Dan, for that outstanding overview. Check out a few other differences, not in the novel. Marcello's blind fascist friend, Italo. He's not in the novel. Not in the novel, Marcello's mother having a morphine addiction. That's not mentioned. Not in the novel is they don't deal with his father's political sinister political history, where, you know, the punitive forays and torture and killing people. In fact, the Moravia novel is not that political. It's mostly focusing on Marcello's abnormality, his repressed homosexuality, rather than the whole Mussolini state. And Bertolucci brings all of that. Obviously, there's the sexual issues, but there's also the political tensions as well. So it's a remarkable adaptation. So we're going to now take questions and thoughts from the audience. Before we do, I'll just give a reminder, a little teaser for December 15th. We are going to I will be back to do a talk on New York on Film that Laurie mentioned, movies filmed in New York City over the decades, going back to very early times. And here's a teaser for you on that lecture coming up. December 15th, we look forward to seeing you. Thank you, everyone. And now Laurie can assist us with questions and thoughts.
First up, we have Judith Perlman. Judith, can you unmute your microphone and start your video?
Now, I would like to share with everyone that as I was going into the old New Yorker theater to see the film for the 8th time, I met Donald Henahan, then the New York Times music critic, coming out, and I knew him. And I said, how did you like it? He said, it was my 8th time. I said, well, it's my 8th time too. And then subsequently, I met a film historian teaching at NYU who said he used it every semester to teach with. He had seen it 27 times, and every time he saw it, he found something new in it. I believe that. I'm sure you all do too.
That's a wonderful recollection. It's funny you say that, Judith, because when I was watching it the other night for the first time in a few years, I was really trying to focus on the narrative more because I'm always taken away by the visuals, and I picked up so much more in the narrative this time. So every viewing definitely brings new elements.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions hands raised right now. So if anyone does, I did want to bring to attention, looking at the trailer that you showed at the beginning, Max, I often talk to my students about something called magenta vision, which is early, and people don't know what it is. And then the next time they see it, they know exactly what it is. And the original single strip color negative didn't hold the dye lots very well. So as time went on, the color would degrade and you'd get this thing called magenta vision. If you go back and look at old 16mm movies, home movies, you'll see it. So I just wanted to
Well, I think Paramount probably struck the trailers on non-Technicolor stock as well.
right.
I'm sure
right.
there were Technicolor prints of the feature made, and I hope a few of them still exist, like they do with Godfather and a few other films from that era. But the trailers weren't given such TLC, and that's why that looks the way it does, I think.
But it's just horrifying to think of this conformist being viewed in magenta vision. I believe the original VHS copies, the awful ones that came out in the whenever they were issued, I believe they did feature a faded print. So it's we've come a long way since then.
We do have some hands up. Lou, you want to unmute your microphone and start your video? Hi, Lou.
Hi.
Welcome.
Greetings
Hello.
from Portland, Oregon.
Hey.
I just wanted to comment that this particular edition of The Conformist from Raro Video contains a 57-minute documentary on the film that has extensive interviews with Bertolucci, where he talks about not only how the project came to him, his choice of the editor and the contributions that that person made to the film. He talks about the leaf scene and why they changed the ending. But one little bit from that I found kind of interesting is their original choice for the actress to play the professor's wife. It was Brigitte Bardot. And they actually had a meeting with her, but unfortunately she wasn't interested in the project. And then quite a bit, well, a few days later, he saw Dominique Sanda for the first time and was captivated by her and eventually cast her in the part. But it would have been a very different film with Brigitte Bardot as the professor's wife, I think.
Yeah, some 15 years older probably than Dominique Sanda, at least by that time, I would think.
Yeah.
That's a great recollection. Thank you so much, Lou. And Dominique Sanda, there was one interview I read with her where she had recently finished making a film for Robert Bresson, Une femme douce. Yes, and she found that to be such a rigid experience where there was no room for interpretation. Everything was so clearly laid out for the actors that working on The Conformist was very liberating for her. She had very
I think that film was the one where Bertolucci first saw her.
Ah, there you go.
Because I think he saw the premiere in Paris. I think he mentioned that.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Lou.
Sure.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Lou. Next up is Joe Feynman. Joe, if you could unmute and I think you.
Hi there.
Hello.
In the early 70s, I became a filmmaker, and there were two theaters in LA. One was called the Fox Venice, and the other was called the New
I
Art.
remember.
In Rome, where I lived for a year, there was a theater in Trastevere called the Pasquini. As time passed, you would see the same movies repeated every 6 weeks or so. I probably saw The Conformist a minimum of 10 times, along with Performance. The impression that they made on me were twofold, and this viewing has created that impression or enhanced that impression. The first one and the easiest one is the eroticism that takes place in this film. The first thing is that one usually sees a movie like this and repeats, well, that was very tame compared with what we make today. I found this viewing of the film one of the most erotic experiences I can remember having watching a movie. So that's the impression number one I had. The other impression I had is going back to my early viewings of the movie. I may be wrong about this, and I'd love your response. I learned the notion of movement in movies from The Conformist. I thought that as many times as I saw it, there was never a shot in the film that did not move in some way. It was either the characters were moving, the camera was moving, and I remember that leaf shot going back because it swept across the film. So those are two impressions that I had, and to this day, along with performance, it's probably my favorite film. Thank you.
Beautiful
I would
memory.
like to cite an interesting example of movement. We saw the shot that concluded the Dutch angle sequence, where they're at the gate to the mother's home, and as Clerici lets Manganiello into the entranceway, the camera rights itself. Okay, now that's a tricky shot to execute, but if you continue watching that shot, it starts to pan right into the courtyard, and then it cranes up a little bit. Just what? I mean, it's beautiful, but that's just inviting all sorts of complications and extra takes because somebody didn't do something right, and it's brilliant.
Thank you, Joe.
Cinematic poetry.
Yes.
And they were fearless. They weren't afraid of, falling off the crane or something.
All right, next up is Olga. Olga, if you could unmute yourself. Joe, you can unraise your hand. Olga?
Yeah, I have a question about the costumes, especially the Venetian blind scene. I mean, the decision to put her in white and black dress with all the movement, she's moving around. I mean, I think it's fantastic. It's fantastic. And I remember seeing this in New York in 1970. So this has, I was a huge fan of Jean-Louis Trintignant. So, and Sanda was fantastic in the Garden of Finzi Contini. So she is perfect for this role as well. I mean, what else could she have done? But the costumes were totally intriguing, especially the black and white dress, that the angles on her dress, and then the Venetian blinds moving around, everything moving around was terrific.
Yes, the woman costume designer, I wrote her name down.
Git Magrini is her name.
Thank you. But she did an extraordinary job. And if anybody knows where I can locate illustrations that she made for the Conformist, let me know, because I'm trying to update my costume design lecture at some point, and I would love to discuss her work. But she was very much involved behind the scenes with Storaro and the art director, and as well as Georges Delarue, the composer. She was all present at those production meetings as they were planning, like the Venetian blind sequence and others.
That was brilliant. It was just brilliant. Brilliant decision.
One other thing, I can't remember exactly where I read him saying it, but Storaro describes that scene in the living room with the Venetian blinds and her dress as purely coincidence. He showed up and was not expecting her to be in that dress. And that inspired him, I think, to go more for the striped blind shadows. But it was just a happy accident.
Well, it was a beautiful, happy accident. Just, confirms that design affects everything.
It does, and he talks about so many happy accidents that are today so memorable.
It's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga.
You, Olga. Next up, we have Janice Greer. Janice, if you could unmute and start your video.
What can you tell us about the composer?
Georges Delarue, this is a genuine co-production, brilliant French composer, best known for his work early in the 60s, late 50s, with doing work for, he worked for Francois Truffaut, and he did, so let's see, what are some of the major scores, Gary?
Jean-Luc Godard's Contempt, I believe that's the Georges Delarue score, right?
He's going to score 3 years after the composer, Day for Night, that magnificent Vivaldi-like score. He employed very classical orchestrations and melodies to his modern scores, and just did some of these. I believe this was his only collaboration with Bertolucci, if I'm not mistaken, because the films before and after tended to have Morricone associations.
Morricone or Gatto Barbieri, of course, famously on his next film.
Yeah, so Delarue was very much part of the French cinema emerging during the 1960s, and just an extraordinary composer. And this is one of his greatest scores, of course.
And if you want to look for it, there is a CD release of Delarue's music for Truffaut's films. I don't know if it's still in print. I've had it for maybe 20 years, but it's worth looking for. It's a beautiful album.
Because he also scored, I think he did The Last Metro, and he did
Oh, yeah. Jules and Jim, I believe.
Jules and Jim, of course. That's one of his greatest scores as well, 1962.
That's ringing in my ears now.
Yes, we'll never get it out of our memories.
Just to add, Joe Feynman, who just spoke with us, wanted to say that the aura was so sexualized, and it reminded him of a film called The Night Porter, which coincidentally was also shot by Storaro. So
I don't think that's true that Vittorio Storaro shot The Night Porter.
I hadn't heard that.
No,
but
Night Porter was a film that was, I think, kind of unfairly trashed in its day. If you go back and look at it now, I think the director, Liliana Cavani, she was an intelligent filmmaker. She might have got caught up in some of the sensationalist elements of that storyline, but I don't think Night Porter is completely dismissible. But it's not in the same category as what we're talking about today.
But I get the whole sensuousness of The Conformist, because even though it's not explicit in even its uses of nudity, but you have that gorgeous blue light casting over Dominique Sanda in that back room of the dance studio. And I'm sorry, Stefan Sanadrelli in her black slip sitting on Marcel's lap in the Paris hotel room. It's very sensual in its design and the uses of color and everything.
The two ladies dangling over the bed, that's unforgettable.
Yes, and of course the tango scene. These are very famous sensual set pieces in cinema history.
Okay, Phil, you're up next. Phil Sugden, if you could, there you go. Hey, Phil.
Hi.
How are you?
Yeah, hello from England. And,
greetings.
Hello back.
Greetings. Cheers.
I watched our Blu-ray version of Conformist a few days ago, and it has a very good audio commentary on it. And it was mentioned how that Orson Welles was a very big influence on Bertolucci, and in the audio commentary spends a lot of time raving about the scene with the swinging light when Manganelli and Marcello in the restaurant. And it reminded me of nothing less than, well, he mentioned that some of the scenes were used in Orson Welles' The Trial, some of the places that the shots were taken. And when the swinging light, I suddenly thought, yes, that's straight from The Trial. I don't know if you remember, somebody's being killed in The Trial or being attacked, and that light is swinging across. So, and yet the guy on the audio commentary didn't make that reference, even though he spent a lot of time on it. So I'm pretty certain that's a reference back to The Trial. And also the other thing is, thinking about Welles, and I know he didn't make the film, but I think he was influential in it. Carol Reed's The Third Man. There's an awful lot of the Dutch angles, or the Dutch tilts, as I think they're also called. Awful lot of that in The Third Man. So there's a Welles connection there as well. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention that.
Those are fabulous, Phil.
Speaking of swinging lights, Max will remember, because he wrote a book about this. The Anthony Mann film T-Men, I believe, has a long scene with a swinging light, probably photographed by John Alton, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
And it's almost a motif, but it works, and it really grabs your attention.
You know, and I should know this because I wrote the darn book, but the swinging light also, it may be desperate. I know there's a scene where a man is being interrogated, and there's a light that's being swung as well. So very much of the noir lighting of John Alton.
Well, now I can't. You mentioned swinging.
I was going to say they probably needed a light wrangler on the set to
exactly
corralled.
You mentioned a swinging light bulb. Now I'm thinking of this actor who plays Manganiello. His name is Gaston Moschen, and he's actually known to American movie makers for his appearance as the infamous Don Fanucci in Godfather 2, and the scene where he's assassinated by Robert De Niro in the staircase during the Feast of San Gennaro, which involves a swinging light bulb. That's how he became immortal to American moviegoers in that way.
Just 4 years later.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, we have Howard Shiver. Howard, if you wouldn't mind unmuting and starting your video if you'd like.
Okay. Actually, it's Dahlia.
Oh, hello, Dahlia.
So what I'd like to say, since no one mentioned it, wait a minute, video is not working, so whatever. But you hear me, right?
We hear you perfectly.
Yes.
Okay. So what kind of came to my eyes while we watched it the first time on Friday, the usage of dogs. So, you know, very obvious when Marcello comes to the professor's house, Dominique Sanda opens the door and the dog jumps on him. And then when she walks around with Marcello's wife, there is a dog running around. And then when he opens the car, or she opens, I think when being chased, she opens the car, the dog attacks the attacker. And the mother, Marcello's mother, in her palatial bed has this little chihuahuas. It's kind of the opposite type of a dog, you know, like a play dog. So I wonder, is there something there? I don't know.
We can only speculate, because so as we've heard from some of these interviews, some of the most memorable images just came on the spot. They said, let's try this, or this is available. And it may have been that way with obviously Anna's dog is a character, because the first cases that you mentioned were the same dog of hers that appear. As for the other dogs in the mother's house, that was part of the production design discussions, I'm sure, that add to the atmosphere.
Having done it myself, I have to say a filmmaker often can't resist the temptation to put his own dog in a shot somewhere.
That's true.
So that's always a rational issue.
Okay, we have two more people, and then we'll go to Sean. Christy Sherman, I'm gonna send you an ask to unmute request. There you go. If you'd like to start your video, you're more than welcome to. Hi, Christy. We can hear you.
Can you see me?
No.
No, I keep getting this sign, unable to start video.
We're asking you to start your video right now, but we can hear you if you'd like to start with your question.
Oh, darn. Okay, start my video. Hang on a second.
There
you are.
Voila.
Oh, okay. It's a little dark, unfortunately. First of all, you know, this movie was revisiting this film after many years was such an extraordinary opportunity to see something that was truly amazing in cinema. And I was able to watch it twice. I rented it on YouTube, and I intend to buy the film actually. I really love the interview because you really get a sense that the director and the cinematographer are really kind of working from the seat of their pants. And you have two amazing artists, you know, who are really plugged in to themselves and to each other. And they, you know, they're just bristling with like fantastic ideas, you know, how to solve the problem, how to solve the next problem. But the reason, and also when Jean-Louis Trintignant was in A Man and a Woman, there was a lot of interesting photography, you know, putting the camera in the trunk of a car, and you know, fantastic innovations. But I was just having a question about the character of Dominique Sanda, because she appears in several different scenes that are unrelated to her, you know, her being married to what's his name, her husband.
Quadri.
Quadri.
Yeah, I mean, you see her with fascists, you know, she's the putain. She's, you know, she plays other roles.
There's three Dominiques in the film, I believe.
Yeah, I was
the multiple roles she plays.
Yeah, I didn't understand how to figure out her character, and maybe one of you could explain it to me if there is an explanation.
My immediate reaction is that was an abstract experiment that Bertolucci did. Let's have Sanda also play these two women in those quick scenes. I don't think those women are intended to be the Anna Quadri character. You gentlemen may disagree.
Let me just say that in the novel,
yeah,
Clerici remembers the prostitute he saw. This would be the second Sonda who appears in the film.
That's right, yeah.
And thinks that she looks an awful lot like Kadri's right.
And I think he says
And-
that in the film too, Dan, doesn't he?
Yeah,
He does
But
say
it's
it
a
in the film.
sort of a private connection he makes, an interior thought he's having, which makes him lust after the wife even more. So it's there planted in the book. And I imagine they just thought, well, let's do it if we can.
Well, it's really strange because in that first or second scene, she's actually with the guy. I'm so sorry that I've forgotten his name. The one that's the fascist that works,
Manganiello.
Yeah, I mean, she's on the desk with him, and then.
Well, actually, I'm not sure that's Manganiello.
I don't think that's a minister in the ministry.
Well, I know, but then there was a scene with him also, wasn't there?
Well, the second time we see her, she's technically a prostitute in this pseudo bordello that Clerici. It was an abstract. It was an abstract.
Okay. Yeah. Well, anyway, thank you so much. And
thank you, Christy.
Christy,
this was
just one other thought.
Yeah.
You mentioned seat of their pants. And this came out in other aspects of the interview with Storaro, that they had almost no pre-production time. This was a very modestly budgeted film, and they were even scouting locations while they were shooting. I mean, this was not diligently pre-planned with lots of storyboards and conferences. They were kind of winging it, and boy, they pulled it off.
Well, they were really winging it in that last scene because they were holding, handheld camera, and not even being certain that they got the shot.
Exactly.
That's a little terrifying.
It is.
That's the way they used to make movies.
I know. I love
it.
Thank you so much, Christy.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
One more.
And our last question of the day, Joshua, could you start your video and unmute? There we go. We got your video. Now start your audio. There you go.
Okay. I love these sessions with New Plaza because I may be the only member of your audience that is not a filmmaker.
Not necessarily.
I was going to say, we have a pretty broad audience.
Yeah, well, I feel like I'm the only one that's not a filmmaker, but I learned so much from these films. Given my age, my era, my only familiarity with Italian films was limited to Sophia Loren and Gino Lollobrigida. And
that's okay.
There are worse ways to go. I mean, really, that's okay.
Yeah, no, but I just learned an awful lot from you guys, and this film, I would never have thought of even looking at it, was really something very special. So again, I thank you all very much.
Just so you know, Josh.
We love to hear that stuff.
We love to hear that. Thank you, Joshua.
Martin Scorsese was very influenced by Italian filmmakers. So there's a great, I think it's called My Voyage to Italy.
Oh, yeah.
Where he talks a lot about the influence of Italian neorealism and that whole time period on his actual craft. So if you want to,
We're still waiting for him to get to finish that film. He stopped at 1960. He said, well, we're working on a little project called Gangs of New York now. We're going to get back to this soon.
Still waiting, Marty.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming. Don't forget to go watch West Side Story. And if you get a chance to watch the new one for our talk back on December 19th, again, that's a fundraiser. And Max's lecture on New York on Film on 12/15. Have a very lovely rest of your Sunday. Sean?
Okay. Hi, everyone. Joshua, for your, just so you don't feel bad, I'm also not a filmmaker. I know we probably had 100 and some people out there or more that weren't filmmakers. So there are a lot of film lovers that just love getting into this detail. And it's so great, you guys, to always get that from you. I guess I just want to end by reminding you, and I think Lori did a great job, but the lecture that Max is giving on December 15th, the Wednesday lecture, it's an encore production. It's one that he's already given, and maybe at the beginning of this year or so, but it's so popular that we have so many people that haven't seen it, that just, watching and getting more information about the films that were filmed in Manhattan. And one of the fun things about this one, you guys, is that Max knows he does his research, and he has the exact location of where these films were filmed in Manhattan. And so it's kind of fun. You can actually walk to the street corner, and even if the building doesn't exist anymore, you can walk there and see that. So that's fun. And then we're super excited about the West Side Story. Again, this is a fundraiser for us. Usually these talkbacks are free, and every once in a while we pull it out and want to use it as a fundraiser. And so we are doing that. We ask for $15, and you can give as little as $1, as much as you want. We do have a special guest, Richard Barrios, who has written a book on the making of West Side Story. And again, we're talking about the 1961 version. We feel the timing is really special because of the new version that's coming out, the Spielberg version that's getting really good reviews, really interesting reviews. So we're excited to compare them as well. So I just want to remind everyone of our programs. Thank you so much for all of your support, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you. Have a good night.